born in 1986 in Yellowknife, Northwest Territories. To my mother, Louise, my father and my mother conceived me, and my father took off right away once he found out she was pregnant. And then from there, from Yellowknife, we moved to Grand Prairie, Alberta, and that's where she met my stepfather. So she met him when I was 1, and they ended up having 2 other kids. And my mother, I guess she's white, and my stepfather was white, and so they had 2 kids, and they were both white, and so they'd always get congratulated for adopting a native child when we were out in public. And you know, I kind of always felt on the outside. And growing up, my one brother was a mama's boy, and my other brother was daddy's boy. And then growing up, you know, we were always poor. Found out later on my parents were drug addicts, and my stepfather more so than my mother. But growing up, it was a pretty toxic environment. My father he worked for a pizza delivery for a lot of years, and I was wondering why. And later on, when I got older and started selling drugs, I realized it's because he got paid cash and tips every night, and so that would go to smoking crack and stuff like that. They managed to hide that pretty well from us for most of my life, but they were always smoking marijuana, and you know, and kind of not doing their parently duties. Grew up in a house, you know, there's animal feces all over the house, there's moldy dishes, none of the dishes were done. So I never really had anybody to teach me what it was to be, I guess, normal, live in a normal household. So at the age of 13, I was severely mentally, emotionally, and physically abused. And I went to school, and it was the typical going to school and taking my shirt off and somebody seeing a huge welt I had on my back from my mother swinging a belt, and it wrapped around and clipped me in the shoulder, and there was a huge welt. So they pulled me out. Social services came that day, pulled me out of school, and at 13, I was put in the foster care system, and it took a little while, but once I realized it wasn't normal for adults to hit children, because I always thought it was normal, you know. My stepdad punched my tooth through my lip, just swearing, cursing, you know, there was no love, there was no nothing. I remember one time, it was my youngest brother's first day of school, and my parents were hungover sleeping, and I would get up and, you know, make their lunches, and it was his first day, so I made his lunch too, and I ended up taking him to school. And then when I got home, I got my ass kicked for stealing their day from them. And so there was a lot of things like that going on. And so at 13, yeah, I got put in the foster care system, and then I realized it wasn't okay for adults to hit children, and I had a lot of rage. My poor social worker trying to find housing for me. I went through a couple foster homes, and she didn't want to put me in the group homes because she knew kind of what those situations were like, but that was the only place that would take me. And I noticed as I was going through the system that the group homes kept getting tougher and meaner and bigger. All the places that said, oh yeah, we deal with all the problem children and stuff like that, I'd only last, you know, 4 to 6 months before they were giving me the boot and moving me along. And so by the age of 16, 3 years later, my social worker, I ended up in Calgary, Woods Homes in Calgary, and they sent me to Calgary Young Offender Center, and I did a couple months in there. And then when I got out, it was April 19th, and the next day was April 20th, the smoking weed protest day or whatever. And so I was outside on the back deck of the group home, just got out of the Young Offender Center, and I was with a couple girls, and they're like, hey, do you want to go smoke weed in the bushes back there? And I'm like, yeah, let's do it. And this other kid heard, and he's like, hey, I want to come smoke weed real loud, and didn't realize that the group home staff window was open. So they heard that, and so we went into the woods to go smoke, and the staff come around, like, well, Lee, you bought yourself a ticket right back to the Young Offender Center. And I'm like, screw that. So I ended up running away. My birthday was 3 days later. I was sleeping in Bowness Park in Alberta. It was still really cold out underneath a tree. And so I decided I was going to hitchhike to Grand Prairie, where my mom was, and ended up making it to Grand Prairie and became a missing person for 3 months. And my social worker seen me. I was in the mall, and she seen me, and she called the cops on me, and they arrested me. They sent me all the way back to Calgary. I went to Young Offender Center for a bit more, and then my social worker came, and she's like, I can't find any place for you. Nowhere will accept you. I had already been in all the 3 Young Offender Centers in Alberta and all the group homes. And she's like, well, can you find your own place to live? I said, yeah, send me back to Grand Prairie. So at 16, sent me back to Grand Prairie. They said, find yourself a house if you can, and we'll rent it for you, and we'll give you $40 a week for food. So they found me a place. It was a shared accommodation basement suite, and one of the guys I was with, he was pretty racist. Like, I'm First Nations. I'm not status right now, though, but he was pretty racist, and ended up getting into an altercation with him. And so I got kicked out of there. And so my social worker said, well, now we have no place for you. We can't find any place. You're going to have to be on your own. We'll still give you the $40 a week voucher for food. So I ended up meeting some people that I knew from school, and they were hanging around in the drug scene. And at 16, I was hanging out at the shack, and I watched a cab driver break a light bulb and put the stuff on it and put a lighter to it, and I watched it melt, and then he smoked it, and then I watched it crystallize after. I was like, oh, what's that? He's like, oh, it's crystal meth. You want to try? Yeah, so I tried it, and that took 2 years of my life. Got involved with a pretty big gang out there, working in the shack, staying up weeks and weeks. Like, I remember maybe in those 2 years sleeping, 20 times, if that. Like, I'm sure I slept more than that, but I don't remember. And it was just a blur at 16. I was getting in fights with full-grown men, just all the insanity that comes with sleep deprivation. And I was skin and bones. You could see my skull, everything. It was disgusting. And so I ended up, the one thing I always did is I never ever told anybody where my parents lived. They saved my life a couple times because of that, because I was always one place I knew I could go. It wasn't the most desirable place to go, but I knew I'd be safe. Nobody knew where I was. So I went there, and I sobered up. I slept for a long time, and I'd eat a 5-kilogram bag of sugar like it was nothing, and got sober off that. And I did pretty good for a while, just smoking weed. But my whole life it's been a substitute, get sick of this or something. So I'd smoke weed for a while. And then I got a job and I was working. Then I left my parents. And I got back into the same life, except for now it changed. Like, when I was there, it was, we'd sell meth and beat up the crack dealers. And when I went back, it had changed. I think the cops and everybody, they really wanted to get meth off the street then, and so it switched to crack, and that was the big thing. And when I took that first hit, I remember my life became consumed by it, and yeah, it took me a long time to get off that. I think I was 21, 22, and my life was going nowhere. I was sleeping in my buddy's van outside his house, and his parents kept waking up in the morning to go to work and kicking me out of there, and then I'd leave there, wait for them to go to work, and then I'd go in and raid their fridge and just go be a delinquent, end up sleeping in the van again. So at 22, I moved to Victoria. I have sisters and stuff in Victoria, and I moved to Victoria, and that's when my drinking really went off. And I always thought, I'm working, drinking, I'm 22, I'm on the island, it's so beautiful out here. Just heavy drinking, and my stepmother, I guess, had enough of it. I got kicked out of there, and I ended up living and working out of a tent with a friend of mine, and we did that for a year or so. Then he ended up moving to Hamilton. From there, I stuck around there, started drinking some more. Then I started getting into coke, sniffing coke, and it was getting pretty bad. I was blowing my whole paycheck, didn't have rent and stuff, and my buddy's like, well, why don't you come up to Hamilton and hang out, or come move up here? And he didn't know I was bad into drugs, and I was like, yeah, okay. And I went up to Hamilton, and 2 doors down this way and 4 doors down that way, there were drug dealers, and ended up getting into crack again. Did that for a while. Then I had to leave. My friends have had enough of me, being short on rent all the time and stuff. I had to go back, so I went to Calgary to rekindle an old romance, and that didn't work out because of my drinking and my drug use. And so I was going to the island, and I had met this girl through a friend of mine one time, and I didn't know where I was going to go on the island. I couldn't go to my stepmother's. I was just going back to the island. I don't know. I was going to go sleep on the street. And this girl that I met, Kylie's her name, she said, well, I got a place you can stay. It's in Nanaimo. And I was like, yeah, okay, that sounds cool. We're going to be, just friends with benefits or whatever. I expressed that I just got out of a relationship. So did she. So I went there, and she started catching feelings, and I was adamant we were just friends. And a year went by, and we were drinking and sniffing coke and stuff. I wasn't really smoking it. Took a break from it, I guess. And then it was on her birthday a year later, I decided to make us Facebook official that we were dating. And then 1 week later, we found out we were pregnant with our first kid. Wow, that escalated pretty fast. Kudos for her. She quit everything. And I kind of cut back, I guess, just trying to work and trying to provide. And then after our first son was born, we moved to Powell River here in Tla'amin, Slamin. It's the reserve down here. And that's where her family's from and everything, so she could be close to family. And because I didn't really have much family, so we could have the support and stuff to help raise our kid. And for the first while, it was okay because we were just staying with her mother and father. There was a few of us in that house. They have four daughters, and then we had me, one of their daughters, and our baby. And in about 7 months of that, we got our own place. Little did I know that we moved in next door to a pretty big drug dealer. And yeah, so the cycle started again. I started using and, hiding it from her, not telling her what I was doing, just using up all my money, stealing from her. Things got really bad. And then at that point, I was, 27, 29. I finally got introduced to opiates, and it started with hydros and just taking hydros, sniffing hydros, and then oxys, and then yeah, I got pretty badly addicted to the opiates, just the pills, and I really liked it, and ended up having to get sober off those. And how I did that was went on Suboxone, and then on Suboxone you can't get high at all, not off opiates anyway, and so I started doing coke because I had to get high. I could not be high, dealing with everything that I was dealing with. And you know, at that time too, after having my first kid and second kid, I have 3 kids now, my mother just showed up out of the blue one day, and that sparked a lot of past memories, because I hadn't seen her in 10 years or something like that. And yeah, whatever excuse I could use to get high. So I started doing coke, and then I quit doing my Suboxone because I was doing lots of coke, and it got so bad. And then I started smoking it again, and you know, I was wait till the wife would pass out, and I would steal her car and go into town to buy drugs, steal her bank card, go take money out of her account, lie to her why I need money for this, all the insanity that comes with being in addiction. And she was pregnant with our 3rd son, and I was trying not to use, but I had been using so much. I hadn't been helping out around the house and stuff like that. She didn't know exactly how deep and how much I was using, and definitely didn't know that I was smoking it outside. And she got mad at me, and I just remember she wanted me to help with something, and I'm like, you know, get the fuck away from me, leave me alone, you fat fucking bitch. I can't believe I said that. And you can imagine how well she took that. I ended up getting a shot in the face for that one, and I didn't know this at the time, but if you call the cops can charge the abuser without the person who called consent or whatever. And so the cops came, because she was like, oh, I'm gonna call my dad, my uncles, and I'm like, fuck this. So I called the cops, and I was like, get me out of here. And the cops showed up, and they were gonna arrest her and take her in and leave me, the drug addict, high as shit, strung out with the kids. And she was pregnant, like 4 or 6 months, something pregnant with our kid. And I'm like, are you kidding? I'm like, I'll just leave. I'll take the vehicle. I'll leave. I'll get out of here. And yeah, so I left, and they gave us a do not contact order, so we weren't allowed to be in contact with each other. Before I left, I was probably 250 pounds, 260 pounds. 7 months later, I was 170 pounds. I said my whole life I would never try heroin, and I was a big crackhead, and I was at this shack, and there was no coke, no crack, or nothing around. And I'm watching, and I'm looking at everybody, and they're all going on the nod. They're high as kites, and I'm like, what the hell? And I ended up going to the bathroom, and there was a lighter with tinfoil with drugs on it, and I'm like, well, I guess I'm gonna try heroin. And yeah, started doing that, and I guess it's not heroin now, it's mostly all fentanyl. And I became super addicted right away. Not eating, not anything, just drugs. And I overdosed. What happened is I wasn't allowed back at the house until her father and mother and everybody said I'm not allowed back at the house until I complete treatment. So she would sneak me back in, and I would try detoxing, and I'd make it like 8 days, 9 days, and we'd get into a fight, or she'd get scared that her dad was gonna see I was there or something. We'd get into a fight, and I'd head back out into town. And that's when your how much you use your I guess tolerance is way down. And I even knew to watch myself and take a small dose. And I took a small dose. I was like, wow, that felt really good. Then I took another one, and I noticed I was going. I was like, pull over here at a friend's place, and I guess from the time it took them to pull into the driveway, I was out. And next thing I know, waking up and buddy's pulling the needle out of the naloxone out of my side. Like, oh, you stupid bastard, you're blue. And I hadn't put the pieces together of what had happened. And we were driving, and I pulled out my pipe, and I was gonna use again. They're like, "Are you kidding me? You just overdosed, and we're dead." And I was like, "Oh, I didn't even know." Then it hit me that, I swore I'd never be like my real father, and that I would always be there for my kids. And I just almost lost them. And didn't happen right away. About a month later, I was at the end of my rope. I made sure that I, not ripped off, but I made sure that I owed my main drug dealers around town a bunch of money. And so they wouldn't give me anything. And yeah, I went to the hospital. And I had already done that a few times, tried to check myself into the suicide ward, and they were wised up to the game. They kicked me out. And this worker named Charlotte, she chased me down in the parking lot. They had given me a ticket to go over to the island. They were just going to send me to the island and get rid of me. Chased me down, got me on Suboxone. Then once I got on Suboxone, I went back to Kylie's. I wasn't allowed to stay there for long. I had to get into treatment. I went to a treatment center in Vancouver when I was sober, and I had an altercation with one of the guys there, and they ended up kicking me out at 9 o'clock at night with no bus pass or anything. And then by fluke chance, my uncle was there, and he picked me up, and then brought me to the ferry the next morning. And I went back to Powell River. Kylie picked me up, and I was still in line for the treatment center in Powell River. Then they called me a week later because I knew one of the counselors that worked there, and she's like, "Yeah, get this guy in, he needs it." And they got me in a week later. I did my 90 days. In that time, I did the 12-step program. I did smart recovery. I really used that 90 days to make sure that I had everything that I needed when I got out. And one of the benefits I find for myself is I had a family waiting for me to get out. I had people excited. My kids, they were excited. I told them I was at school. They were excited I got out, or was getting out, and I was healthy, and I looked good, and I was happy. And to this day, 3.5 years later, my marriage didn't work out, which is unfortunate, but we got together using drugs and alcohol. We were able to overlook some of the things that we shouldn't have if we were both sober, and so that didn't work out. And I guess the greatest part right now is I've had every excuse that I would have used to go out and use, and somehow I'm not using. I'm really working hard at it. Don't get me wrong, there's temptations everywhere. I live next door to a liquor store. I know a lot of the people in town that do use, and I see them around everywhere. And in the 3.5 years I've been sober, they've aged 20 years, and they're still doing the same thing. So that's definitely an encouragement to stay sober. I've lost, 15, 20 people that I knew and used with. They're gone now. Some young people that I went to treatment with, absolutely insanely talented people, they're passed on now. And I just use those things to make sure that I still remain sober and stay sober to this day. And if you're struggling, one of the things that also helps is definitely playing the tape through. When I want to use, I think, okay, what's it going to be like? I know I'm going to have no money after. I could go into it with the best intentions. Your mind will play tricks on you. You've got this amount of sober time you can go and you can use, and you'll be fine. You'll be able to pull it back together. But I know exactly what will happen is I'll have no money. Then I'll be hate myself for using, and then I'll just be depressed. And then what I'll do, I'll go and try to find money and get money how you get money, lie, cheat, and steal. And the cycle will just start all over again. And I didn't understand what they said. It's not like the first time you got high. You'll pick up exactly where you left off. how I understand that now is you might get really high, but you know, every single person that's been waiting for you to fail will be like, ha, he failed. And all credibility, everything that I've worked for this past 3.5 years, it'll all go out the window. All of a sudden, you know, I'll have not even used, or I'll be using the whole 3.5 years as far as they're concerned, right? So I'm just keeping all the things that, you know, all the reasons that I don't want to use and I want to stay sober in my head, and learning to deal with these emotions of divorce and heartbreak and love and joy, and watching my kids grow sober, learning to deal with all these emotions sober. It's not easy, but it's manageable, and you can get through it. And I'm still hopefully going to get through it for the next 40 years.
Did you see yourself here 10 years ago?
No, God, no.
What do you see yourself in 10 years?
Well, one of my goals is to get a piece of property. Like I said, I got 3 boys and I'm co-parenting them right now, but I don't have like a suitable enough place to have my three children, 3, 6, and 9. So in 10 years, I plan to have that situation dealt with. Ideally, I'd like a piece of land that I can build a house with, so that, you know, I can settle, like stay in one place and not move around, and just set up stability for my children.
Money were no option.
Mm-hmm.
What did you do? Money were no option. What did you do?
Money was no option. Definitely try to take care of this community, you know. I definitely got a passion for helping other people. Like at this hotel I stay at now, there's some people there in addiction, and you know, they're hungry all the time, and I always give them food and smokes and whatever, just to make their life easier. So I would definitely, you know, set up something to help people in recovery, even in active addiction, right? Like with food, finding placements, stuff like that. Money's no option. Well, let's build everybody a house, you know. There's definitely got to be some other things. Like, I don't agree with having somebody come in 90 days and then just cutting them loose into their same situation they were when they came in, right? How are they going to succeed? You know, all the same people they know, things like that, you know. No skills, nothing, you know, no clean, like no new clothes, nothing to be proud, nothing except for being sober for 90 days to be proud of.
Yeah.
You know, I would set up some kind of secondary, like they have a second stage, but still, even that's not enough. You know, I believe we got to give these people something so good to hold on to that they don't want to use again, right? So I would definitely sink a bunch of money into something like that. Of course, take care of my kids, but just dealing with resentments towards my ex-wife. I know I've got to learn to forgive and move on. You know, she feels one way and I feel another way. The one thing I'm so grateful for is we both have a love for our children. That's the one thing that we did have in common. So trying to make it as easy as we can on the kids. She's never told me I can't see my kids. You know, I've got unlimited access to my kids and stuff. So and with my kids, yeah, it's hard on them. I've explained though, you know, mom wasn't happy, dad wasn't happy, and I don't want my kids to grow up thinking that's how two people in love are supposed to behave towards each other. So I told them I'm away for a time now, but I'm working towards building something more stable for us in the future. So they know I'm working for them. I'm working weekends. You know, I'm doing all sorts of things just to try to get ahead and try to afford groceries in this wonderful time. My mom, no, she told me I'm dead to her. So my brother ended up having kids, and because of the girl he had kids with, and he's still living with my mom and dad, and he's like, I don't know, I think he's like 30 or something. He's got no social skills, no skills to get out and be away from my parents or whatever. But the girl he had kids with, she's already got a kid in foster care. So the kid that she had with my brother was taken away right away, and my mother was trying to get them. And unbeknownst to me, the social worker had asked me to write a letter of how I felt about them getting the kids, and my wife knew about all the horrible things that went on with my mother, and she had wrote a letter to my social worker under my name stating everything that happened to me and that my mother should not be getting these kids. And it was presented in the trial or whatever, and so my mom caught wind of that, and she called me and she pretty much said, eat shit and die and I'll never talk to you again. And so I have no relationship with my mother or my stepfather. He'd smack my mom around a whole bunch, and I told him next time I see him I'm gonna kick his ass, and for smacking me around and my mom. But and then my real father, that abandoned me, he's making amends. He moved. He ditched all his kids. He's got 5 kids. He ditched them all, but he moved in with my sister, his daughter, back to the island, and he's took a lesser job. You know, he's making amends. He's getting up there in the ages, and I think he's got lots of regrets that are finally starting to haunt him. And his mom died, and his dad died, my grandparents recently, and so yeah, I think he's trying to make up for some lost time, which is good because he doesn't live in the same town as I do, so it's baby steps, which is definitely what I need. But it's getting better. And then, you know, my brothers and sisters would kind of stay in contact, but not enough. I pretty much have no family here. The closest family is like a 3-hour drive away. But we try to make it work as best as possible. We'll see you in 5 years.